We're going to start out today with David Coon speaking about crimes against the environment and wondering why they go unpunished. David Coon is considered an authority on government environmental policy. He served as the Conservation Council's policy director since 1985, a position he held until a few weeks ago when he became the organization's executive director. David Coon first became engaged with the Canadian environmental movement while studying ecology at McGill University, where he helped establish the McGill chapter of Greenpeace. He has served as chair of the Canadian Environment Network and the Canadian Climate Action Network. David Coon has an extensive experience lobbying the government for policies that better protect our environment.
40 years of sort of environmental awareness, environmental education, environmental activism, and yet we continue to see crimes against the environment. So let me try this. In the oxygen around us, there's a sense that in the pursuit of progress, we've got to tolerate a little bit of pollution, a little bit of plunder along the way. And so why would you punish that? We hear, as a result, we hear the need a lot from politicians about, and not just politicians, all kinds of commentators, industry, and so on, about the need for balance, so that a little bit of environmental protection doesn't get in the way of the little bit of plunder and pollution that's necessary to speed our pursuit of progress and material growth. In the way of what specifically? Well, in the way of seeking more progress, more economic growth, more jobs, more profit, more income, more. So, in other words, those ends I just listed are used to justify the means, and part of those are plundering nature and treating the biosphere as a dump. You might say that industrialized society has become hardwired to pollute and plunder. Sort of gets back to my sense of suggesting it's kind of in the oxygen now. We're immersed in this. Particularly, since the 1970s, when the rise of the modern environmental movement began, late 60s, early 70s, our economy has increasingly become disembedded from society, creating what Karl Polanyi, the economic historian, called a market society. And within this market society, over time, particularly over this last 35, 40 years, the sort of cultural and ethical norms that perhaps have held us in good stead in the past have been perverted in some ways, so that the moral and cultural constraints to consumerism, greed, and so on have been eroded seriously. And that, of course, has aided and abetted the growth necessarily, this is what you're after, of the market society. And, so, in a sense, what's that in operation here is an ideology about material growth and progress. One that actually functions, I would submit, in both capitalist-controlled industrial societies and state-controlled industrial societies. This notion of this ideology has sort of been brought to the fore by three scholars, Woodward, Van der Veen, and Van Heest, economist and political science, a social worker. And it's interesting, the notion that this pervades industrial society, and where at one point, as all ideologies are designed to achieve something that's useful, which was providing more, when more was better, at least for much of our society. It now seeks to protect the status quo at just about any cost, with every means to its disposal. So we've seen dramatic increases in deregulation, as was talked about earlier, big push for globalization, a huge push to minimize the power and ability of government to pursue the common good, uphold public interest. So, as a result, in the face of this, while the environmental movement cast broadly, I don't mean just environmental groups, but the environmental movement as a social movement over the last 40 years has won many battles, it's clearly losing the larger war, and climate change is certainly one of the symptoms of this. There's way too much pressure on the planet. Current path of unconstrained material growth continues to trample on the ability of the environment, or the limits of what the environment can sustain, and increasingly what people can endure well. So this gets you to questions around, well, how do we re-embed the economy into society where it can actually operate to meet the needs of people and communities in a meaningful way, rather than the other way around, which I think increasingly people on the street have a sense has been going on. So this gets us to notions of moving to a new paradigm, moving from the sort of economics of endless growth based on ever-increasing consumption to an economics of enough, the kind of steady-state economics that people like Herman Daly has written about extensively for many decades now. In fact, as the title of one of his books suggests, an economics for communities, for the environment, and for the future. And it brings it down really to notions around really focusing at the community level. How do we strengthen communities, make them more resilient in the face of what's going on provincially, nationally, globally? And it quickly gets you into discussions about how, in fact, can we start to, once again, feed ourselves and become more self-reliant in food, where farmers can actually make a living from reasonably sized farms in ways that can sustain their family while providing good, healthy food that doesn't cost the earth. Similarly, around energy, how can we become increasingly self-sufficient for energy on a more regional basis or a more local basis that is generated in ways that doesn't cost the earth, but is based on renewable forms of energy. So it means looking at what I call community power and how we can build that and expand on that and engage people in that. There's, I think, a growing sense among people that we've got to, I think, across the general population, that we've got to take steps to reduce our footprint. And increasingly trying to sort of how you do that, and looking to government to help them and us do that. And at the community level, I think it offers people a real sense of hope, where we can make change, where we can make a difference, and start to pursue a sort of new paradigm of an economics of enough. And the little image I like, I guess, the contrast is thinking about purchasing the things you need. It's the difference between kind of the farm market image and the Walmart image. And so the farm market image has a lot going for it. It includes personal relationships between the consumer and the provider, which of course doesn't have at the Walmart, but is really based on local production for local consumption at a community scale. Those are my thoughts.